and welcome back to Four Corners of the Galley. I'm your host PBO, and you're joining me on another edition of What the Bleep Westworld. This is our weekly breakdown of Season 2 Westworld, where we try to figure out what the heck Westworld is doing on a weekly basis. So, without further ado, let's kick right into this episode. So we've reached episode 7. I really can't pronounce it, and I'm not gonna. I think it's Les Torches. Straight the Match is what I think it's called. I probably messed it up. I apologize in advance. So let's get a little recap. After last week's huge reveal that Dr. Ford is still alive and he's living inside of the Cradle's CPU, which is basically like Rick and Morty's multiverse, where actually inside of the Cradle in their main server hub, there is basically a server in this virtual world that Ford is living in that he is controlling and causing a virus for all these other different hosts, and that's what's really messing with Peter Abernathy is what they put in him, and also this other uplink that Ford has done, and basically we find out he's still alive in some form. So we kick right off, and this episode, let's just say for the first time, I think with this show, they show us that basically what we get revealed in this episode is there is 2 timelines, like I've been telling you guys. There's the current timeline, which has Carl, the director of operations, which we see in this one. And then there's all the previous stuff, which is Bernard, Charlotte, everybody on the run, which we're going to get to because everyone's kind of intersects, and they kind of give it to you out in the open, and then they even give you a bigger explanation that, mind blown, they kind of give you the whole purpose of Westworld. So let's kick this sucker right off. So this week in the current timeline, the actual up-to-date timeline, we catch back up, and basically it's a cold opening. And Bernard's sleeping. And he's passed out on the ground, and he's dreaming. He's having his memories of his son that he never has, obviously, because this is not his son. This is Arnold's. So he's sitting there dreaming, and Stubbs wakes him up. And he's like incoherent, he can't figure out what's going on, and Stubbs is like, hey, we gotta figure out a plan, man. We gotta get the heck out of here. I don't trust them. I don't trust Delios and their little special project on what they're trying to do, and we need to work together. He's like, when I was with Charlotte, she was in that room and she had a StatCom and she can reach outside, and we need to call for help. So they're about to get together and go to this thing, and out of nowhere, Carl shows up and goes, "You two, come with me." And he's like, "What the heck?" So Bernard's looking all disoriented like always, and like how we always catch up with Bernard because he's always in some fog or haze because his memories are all mixed up, and this is also their way of storytelling to show you that he can't really, so you can't figure out what's going on. But in this episode, they basically flat out tell you that we're in the current timeline and that this is what's going on. So Carl ends up taking Stubbs and Bernard to Ford's hidden lair. They take them back to Ford's house where he kept all of his family robots, one of himself, his mom, his dad, and his dog, and they took him into this room, the room that Bernard Arnold would back in the days have his conversations with Dolores, and also where Dr. Ford did a lot of his work. So they take him down there, and basically Carl tells him, like, look, we found this huge blue splotch, and we scanned it, and the DNA of Teresa, the old ex-head of Delios, DNA was there, and we need to find some answers. So they get him down there, and Bernard's freaking out. You can see in his face, he's freaking out, and Carl's like telling him, like, look, man, one of you two knows something, and we're going to figure this out. And he basically eliminates Bernard because he's like, he doesn't look like he could do it. But you Leslie, you look like Ashley, you look like you can do it. So he starts to do it, and then Bernard out of nowhere says, stop. And then right before anything can happen, they find a secret doorway. Some secret doorway we didn't even know about. They open up the doorway, and what's inside? Bam! The next big secret they let out that we already know, but now Delios knows and Charlotte knows that Bernard is a host. So they get this great scene where you see all these different copies of all these different Bernards, and I'm assuming this is Arnold's, all the different versions that that Dr. Ford worked on trying to perfect Bernard throughout the years, and these are all his different versions and the ones he worked on before he got to the correct Bernard at this time. And so the next thing you get is you got Charlotte sitting in front of Bernard, and Bernard's kind of like freaking out, and what you find out is they're psychologically making him think he's getting waterboarded. So without waterboarding him, and mentally, because they have the power to mess with his mind, they're making him seem like he's drowning and he's dry heaving. It's a great explanation on screen showing you the reactions that this actor Jeffrey Wright's doing. It looks beautiful. So this all happens, and they're asking him more questions, like always. They're trying to figure out the whole answers to this whole thing. So like always, we go deep into the mind of Bernard like normal, and he takes us on a path to what we're going to see in the past. And they basically flat out admit that the things in the past are the past, and that this is the only current timeline because Carl is the key figure. So I'll get to what Bernard gets to, because that's some real good juicy stuff, and we'll get into the Bernard timeline. But still in this timeline, basically at the end of this whole thing, once Bernard comes out of his, daze and telling memories, and Charlotte's right there like, you need to remember, and she's like, where is Peter Abernathy's CPU? Because you're going to find out about that in a second. And he basically tells her that the information that they need is in Section 16, Sector 16, Section 5. And it's basically the Valley Beyond, where everyone is going to meet up. This great valley, this place that we have not known about, or maybe we do know, but we just didn't realize what it was, that William built, the Man in Black built in his youth, that they're all converging on. And then the next thing you hear from the Delios and Carlos, let's go back to the Valley Beyond. So obviously they've already been there, but now we're going to go back, or we're going to all meet there and converge there. Obviously this is the big end to this whole season, is whatever happens at this valley that, William built. So it's a great opening. It gives you so much going on, and it finally clears the timelines on where everybody is and what everybody's doing. So that was a great thing. So now we're going to kick into Bernard's timeline, because he's the main function, and we'll intertwine in between them. But we're going to kick to Bernard's timeline and talk about Bernard from a week before this current events and what happened to him. So let's kick it to Bernard's timeline. We meet back up with Bernard, and Bernard is still inside of the cradle in the CPU, and he's just seen that Ford is alive. And he's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, he goes, let me show you something. So what you find out is, in this world, all of the host memory and old functionalities are in there. So you see Maeve in her old world, you see Clementine, you see Teddy, you see Dolores, and they're all there. And Ford is like talking to Bernard, he's like, why do you think I'm here? He's like, Bernard can't figure. He's like, think harder. Basically, Ford goes to tell him that, do you think James Delios was the only one he was betting on to figure out eternal life? He goes, he was also betting on me. So you find out that Ford is known from the start about the whole James Delios trying to search for eternal life, using his body scan and putting it inside another body before he went crazy. What Dr. Ford has figured out is, what you find out is he's already figured this out in two ways. One way is he figured out a way to put himself without his body and just his consciousness inside of this whole cradle CPU area. But what you also realize is that he's already created what James Delios is looking for, because he created in Bernard. And this is what the whole reveal is. Dr. Ford tells you the purpose of Westworld. The purpose of Westworld is not for us humans to go engage and live out our fantasies and live in a world where there's no consequences. It's for them to monitor and watch everything we did, and all of our personalities and traits and the way we react to certain situations, take all that information and figure out a way to have eternal life. It's a crazy flip of the mind. So while we're escaping to this place where we can go and kill anything we want and do anything we want to anybody, and there's no consequences, and they get to live forever, we're searching for their eternal life that they have, and they want to be us. They want to live the lives that we have, because they want to be real and thought of as real people and have souls, which they don't have. So it's this great flipping of minds that he does, and it shows that this whole time, Delios has been tracking all the human activity that's been going on in the park. So basically, every single time a person went into the park, each host monitored all their different characteristics, things they did, things they watched, ate, who they messed with, slept with, all those different things, and it's all compiled in this huge file that Peter Abernathy has. So this completely blows Bernard's mind. At the same time, Ford takes Bernard to the house that Arnold built, that he first built, which was not in Japan, but first that he built in there, and it's this beautiful place. And he starts to tell him that this is where you were born. He's like, "What do you mean this is where I was born?" He goes, "This is where I built you." He goes, "You were built by me." So Dr. Ford already figured out a way to take the body scan or the memories that he had of his partner Arnold and created Bernard with. And his barometer to figure out if he was doing good was Dolores. So here Bernard thought that he never had any interaction with Dolores. It was all a lie. They actually spent many, many years inside of this house perfecting Bernard. She always was the barometer. Bernard's job was to convince Dolores that he was actually Arnold and real. And it didn't take until years later that Dolores recognized that Bernard was actually Arnold. And I love the little flashback they show. "Oh, you're almost the person I knew. Oh, you're almost..." Like, Dolores is the meter. Just talk about boom, mind blown. I mean, just crazy mind blown. So you find all this out about Westworld and Bernard, and then at the same time, Bernard's like, "No, I'm supposed to have free will." He goes, "You are. It's you think you do. But if I wanted to take it back, I could." And Bernard and Dr. Ford does this great where he reaches out to grab him. You're like, what the heck is going on? What does he do? So the next time you get to Bernard is Bernard's coming out of the cradle and they're putting the little ball back into him, and he's coming back to life. And Elsie's there like, "Oh, Bernard, you did it. I don't know what you did, but you fixed everything." And it's like, what do you mean you fixed everything? Well, lo and behold, freaking Dr. Ford went into basically took his, whatever he is inside of this CPU cradle and went inside of Bernard's body and is now basically like two people living inside Bernard, and he's guiding Bernard through this stuff now. So the first thing he does is he figures out a way to get rid of Elsie because he doesn't want to hurt her and sends her off to go get a car to go send off to the Valley Beyond. Then he starts walking back around and he goes, "What are you..." And Bernard's like, what are you doing? This is not your game anymore." He goes, No. My game is done. This is your game now. So Forrest is really messing with him. So Bernard can't handle it. He doesn't know what's going on. And he can't believe that Ford is making him do all these things. Like, "We've got to stay on plan, Bernard. Let's stay on plan." So he starts guiding them. They get to the map room, and he has Ford has Bernard disable the entire system, and he tells him, like, "If you do this, Dolores is going to run wild." And he goes, "Exactly, that's what I want." He wants that to happen. So Bernard shuts down the entire Westworld system, all down, so there's no communication, all down, and then smashes it. And now Dolores is free to reign as she wants, and we'll get back to her in a second. And then at the end, you have this beautiful scene, I mean beautiful symmetry, where Bernard is walking through, and these guards of Delios catch up to him. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "I work here." He's like, "Nah." And in the back of Bernard's mind, Ford's sitting there going, pick up the gun, Bernard, and shoot them." He's like, "No, I'm going to do it." The guards get distracted by another noise. They walk away, and he goes, "Pick up the gun." And all of a sudden, the screen goes black, and it shows that next scene, and it's freaking Dr. Ford in a flash. Just shoot. Oh, what a gorgeous. And then it cuts back to Bernard. Oh, just beautiful imagery they showed right there. I just thought that scene was absolutely gorgeous, and it just shows you that Bernard is now not back in control again of his body, and just woo! And it leaves you there with obviously more to come. So, man, that was just... that was just a beautiful, beautiful way to end that whole Bernard timeline and show you that Ford is taking over. Which also makes you think, is Ford still controlling Bernard in the current timeline when he's talking to Carl and all the memories he's having? It doesn't seem like it, but we have no idea, and we'll find out. So now let's kick over to the Dolores and Teddy timeline and really break it down with what's going on after that train came into the Mesa and blew some things up. So let's kick it over to Dolores and Teddy. Alright, so now we got the Dolores and Teddy timeline. So this is like I'm saying, they all kind of intertwine, which I like what they're doing right now. So in the Dolores Teddy timeline, the train has crashed into the Mesa, which I just figured out that was the Mesa. So the Mesa is the main offices where Delios runs Westworld and everything. So they crashed into the Mesa, and you hear this sound, and Charlotte's got Peter Abernathy and all the mercs and all the people, and she's like, "What the sound?" They're like, "We need to secure this area." And Stubbs starts seeing that all these people are coming. So basically this whole entire horde that the Dolores and Teddy have start to take over the Mesa. And they go one by one taking over the Mesa. All this noise and madness going on. You got Charlotte and Stubbs, and they're freaking out trying to get the CPU out of Peter Abernathy faster. She's like, what's taking so long? He's like, there's a lot of information. She's like, at one point, she's like, we got to get this out of his head. And you see Dolores and them storming in. They start taking over the Mesa piece by piece. So some groups break off. Dolores takes Teddy, and they head straight for her father, Peter Abernathy. They get to Charlotte, and they have this beautiful scene where Teddy comes out of nowhere and grabs a gun and pulls it on him. So now you got this standoff. So now Teddy and Dolores are there, and Peter Abernathy is looking beat up, and Charlotte's freaking out. She's like, Dolores, we could be so good. And Dolores starts threatening Charlotte. You're like, oh, wow. Charlotte's going to die right now because she's just ruthless. She's wild at this point. She has no care. Just when she's about to kill freaking Charlotte, you know, all this craziness and commotion has been going on because they got their hordes out everywhere. There's Delio security everywhere, and it's just a giant firefight in the Mesa. Beautiful action scenes, firefights everywhere, but the bigger, more actual story stuff is taking place in this little room. So they start, you know, she gets distracted, and right before she can really get to Charlotte finds another way to break out and runs, and she gets away. So she gets away, and they end up having to basically, Peter Abernathy, you know, starts talking to Dolores and, you know, reminding him that it's her father, the whole deal. And she ends up making the self-sacrifice choice and removing her father's CPU. So she completely removes his CPU from his brain and strolls out of there with her and Teddy, and they start to go back on their mission down below. So while they're doing that, going that way, at the same time, you got Angela. After the whole Bernard gets out of the CPU in the cradle and gets away with Elsie, she's back downstairs at the cradle, and she's just standing there looking at it. And you're like, what the heck's going on? So she's just looking at the cradle. One of the mercs for Delio shows up, and they have this conversation, and she's showing what she was designed and built for to seduce and seduct him, and he's all, you know, like lollygagged, and he can't handle it. She tricks him, ends up pulling the pins on his grenade, and boom. That's how the cradle blows up. So there you go. Now they've blown up the backups. Now that the backups are blown up, now all the hosts are free. So now they have nothing clouding their minds anymore, and they're free to do whatever the heck they want because there's no more backup system telling them that they have to obey by those rules and laws that were created for them. Now they're just completely free, and they're off gone. So Angela ends up self-sacrifice for that. Dolores ends up down below, and you get to a particular situation, which I'll get to in a second, but she ends up running into Maeve, and Maeve will explain to in a second. They have a little conversation. She ends up leaving with Teddy on horses and her thing and having the CPU, and she's off to the valley. So we're all going to get to converge at this valley. So she's now got the information that Delios wants in her hands, and she knows how important it is, and she wants to have a final confrontation at this valley that William built, and obviously this is going to be a huge, probably 2-episode event at the end. So that was definitely just wild where they get to. So let's get to the smaller thing. This is a combination of the Man in Black and Maeve storyline kind of smushed together. So let's get to that. All right, so the Men in Black, Maeve smushed together timeline. So we meet back up with Maeve, and of course, she's running. She's running with her daughter. You just see the scene, and she's running with her daughter, trying to get away from the Native American, the blackface Native Americans. She runs into this town. At the same time, William, the Man in Black, is riding into this town with Lonzo and his Lawrence and his cousins, and they get there at the same time, and it's like some wild, crazy symmetry that Westworld is trying to have. So the same thing that has always played out in Maeve's mind that she can't get rid of is her guarding against her daughter, tucked in the corner, and who walks in is the Man in Black, and who walks in? The Man in Black. They have this little yelling at each other. At this point, the Man in Black thinks that Ford is still controlling all this stuff, and he's like, isn't this a little lazy? Come on, you're gonna pick her? And she's like, I don't know what Ford wants, but I know I want you dead. So this ends up becoming this huge confrontation, and man, talk about crazy. So Maeve is obsessed with killing the Man in Black. So she starts controlling the different cousins of Lawrence to shoot at the Man in Black, and he starts getting hit. I mean, he really starts getting hit. And he's got shot a couple times. He's down on the ground. You really think he's done. Out of nowhere pops up Lawrence. So Lawrence pops up, and he turns the gun on Maeve, and he's about to take her down. they have a dialogue where she's trying to tell him, like, are you going to protect your master now? And yada, 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 and like trying to school him. She's like, think back in your mind. How has he ever helped you? And now that the CPU is gone and Lawrence can think for himself, he starts seeing all the times that Lawrence sees all the different times that the Man in Black has betrayed him and killed his wife and tortured him and done all these things. But the Man in Black's like, look, it doesn't matter. She's alive now. I helped you this last time. And he's like, no. He starts freaking out and realizing that that he is not the friend that he thinks he is, and that he is worse than this. So he ends up shooting him, and you don't know what the heck's happening. You don't know if he's dead. You think he's dead. You're like, damn, this is the end of William the Man in Black. It's crazy. So at the same time, out of nowhere, a bunch of Delio's Doom Buggies roll up, and they start shooting up everything, and Maeve gets blasted. And what is it? It's Lee, the guy that called on these people to get him over. So they end up shooting her, and she doesn't die. Lee grabs her and takes her with her, and that's how we get Maeve ending up back at the Mesa, because she's been shot up and left there, and left for dead. Her and Dolores have this long discussion about, life, and Dolores almost kills her, but she ends up saving her and keeping her going, and then, moving past. The Man in Black is left for dead, and we don't know if William's going to die because he's sitting out there in the middle of this little town now. He doesn't have that little tool he used to help himself, and he's got bullet wounds all on him. So they definitely leave it open-ended. I don't know if Grace is going to pop out of nowhere and save him. Who the heck knows? But it definitely leaves a big old gap, and Maeve is also still left dying, and she's on the slab. So two main timelines and two main characters we've been following are both vitally wounded and have, who knows what's going to happen to them. At the same time, everybody is converging at this valley where these things are going to happen. So I don't know if this valley is a kickback to episode 1 with that water where all the hosts were in the water. Maybe there was something else. They did say to drain it. We're going to have to wait and see. These last 3 episodes are going to be wild. Woo! Alright folks, well there you go. That's episode 7. I'd like to thank you for joining me this week. Please, if you like everything you hear, and if you're just enjoying it, like, comment, subscribe down below. Thanks for all the love and support. Until next time folks, good night Ted.